Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Avengers of the New World, The Story of the Haitian Revolution, by Laurent Dubois, narrated by Paul Woodson. I saw on a magnificent pedestal a Negro, his head bare, his arm outstretched, with pride in his eyes and a noble and imposing demeanor. At his feet were the words, "To the Avenger of the New World." Louis-Sébastien Mercier, l'an 2140, rêve si l'on fut jamais, 1771. I have avenged America. Jean-Jacques Dessalines, 1804. Prologue. On New Year's Day, 1804, a group of generals gathered in Saint-Domingue to create a new nation. Their leader, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, had once been a slave. So, too, had several of the men who joined him in signing their Declaration of Independence. Some had been born in Africa and survived the Middle Passage. Others, including Dessalines, had been born into slavery in the French colony. They signed their names next to those of men who had once been slave owners, including one apparently nicknamed the Good White. Many were men of mixed European and African descent who had been free long before the Revolution began, several of whom had fought against Dessalines in a brutal civil war a few years earlier. Now, however, they stood behind him to declare that they had forever renounced France, and would fight to the death to preserve their independence and freedom. Haiti was founded on the ashes of what had been, 15 years before, the most profitable slave colony in the world, its birth premised on the self-evident truth that no one should be a slave. It was a dramatic challenge to the world as it was then. Slavery was at the heart of the thriving system of merchant capitalism that was profiting Europe, devastating Africa, and propelling the rapid expansion of the Americas. The most powerful European empires were deeply involved and invested in slavery's continuing existence, as was much of the nation to the north that had preceded Haiti to independence, the United States. For decades, Saint-Domingue had been the leading example of the massive profits that could be made through the brutal institution. Then, in 1791, the colony's slaves began a massive uprising. It became the largest slave revolt in the history of the world, and the only one that succeeded. Within a few years, these Caribbean revolutionaries gained liberty for all the slaves in the French Empire. The man who came to lead Saint-Domingue in the wake of emancipation, Toussaint Louverture, had once warned the French that any attempt to bring slavery back to the colony was destined to fail. Although he did not live to see it, he was proven right. When freedom was threatened by Napoleon Bonaparte's regime, the people of Saint-Domingue fought successfully to preserve it. Through years of struggle, brutal violence, and imperial war, slaves became citizens in the empire that had enslaved them, and then founders of a new nation. This book tells the story of their dramatic struggle for freedom. For many who fought slavery, especially slaves elsewhere in the Americas, the Haitian Revolution became an example of what could be accomplished and a source of hope. For those who defended slavery, it became an illustration of the disastrous consequences of freedom. During the 19th century, an economically and politically isolated Haiti became the object of scorn and openly racist polemic. Most historians in Europe and North America ignored the Haitian Revolution, but in Haiti itself 2 scholars wrote detailed histories, basing their accounts on archives and on interviews with surviving witnesses and participants, creating a rich nationalist historiography that was little known outside the country. On the eve of World War II, the Caribbean intellectual and activist C.L.R. James wrote The Black Jacobins, which remains the classic account of the Revolution. James, looking toward the struggles for independence that he saw emerging in Africa, saw the story as an example of both the possibilities and dangers of such struggles. He understood, as the title of the book makes clear, the potent cross-fertilization between the revolutionary transformations that took place in France and the Caribbean. He also eloquently described the dilemmas faced by Louverture as he sought to defend freedom in a world dominated by slaveholding empires. James insisted that the story he had to tell was deeply relevant for the world in which he lived. The Martinican poet and activist Aimé Césaire similarly noted a few decades later that Haiti was where the colonial problem, which the 20th century was trying to resolve, was first posed in all its complexity, where the knot of colonialism was first tied and where it was first untied. More recently, historians in Haiti, France, and the United States have provided new perspectives on colonial Saint-Domingue and the process that destroyed it through detailed studies of slave life and the communities of free people of color, new histories of the Revolution, and examinations of the impact of African culture on its development. At the same time, studies on slavery, slave resistance, and the process of emancipation in the Americas have provided new tools for understanding the Haitian Revolution. All these works make it possible to see, with more clarity, what the events of the period meant for those who lived through them, and they highlight their crucial importance in the broader struggles over the meaning of freedom and citizenship that shaped the Atlantic world during the 18th and 19th centuries. The Revolution began as a challenge to French imperial authority by colonial whites, but it soon became a battle over racial inequality, and then over the existence of slavery itself. The slaves who revolted in 1791 organized themselves into a daunting military and political force, one ultimately embraced by French Republican officials. Facing enemies inside and outside the colony, these Republicans allied themselves with the insurgent slaves in 1793. They offered freedom in return for military support, which quickly led to the abolition of slavery in the colony. The decision made in Saint-Domingue was ratified in Paris in 1794. The slaves of all the French colonies became citizens of the French Republic. These events represented the most radical political transformation of the Age of Revolution that stretched from the 1770s to the 1830s. They were also the most concrete expression of the idea that the rights proclaimed in France's 1789 Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen were indeed universal. They could not be quarantined in Europe or prevented from landing in the ports of the colonies, as many had argued they should be. The slave insurrection of Saint-Domingue led to the expansion of citizenship beyond racial barriers, despite the massive political and economic investment in the slave system at the time. If we live in a world in which democracy is meant to exclude no one, it is in no small part because of the actions of those slaves in Saint-Domingue, who insisted that human rights were theirs, too. The goal of the slave insurgents during this first phase of the Haitian Revolution was not to break away from France. Indeed, at the time it was slave owners, not slaves, who clamored most for autonomy and even for independence. And along the way, the slave rebels became the allies of imperial power and helped preserve the colony against France's enemies, gaining freedom and citizenship in the process. What one writer called the worst catastrophe ever to befall an empire was, in fact, a dramatic challenge to what empires had been, and for a brief time, a model for a different kind of imperial relationship. Only in the early 19th century did a true war of national liberation begin in Saint-Domingue. Ultimately, while emancipation had been won through an alliance with the French Republic in 1794, it was preserved by the defeat of the French army in 1804. The people of the new nation of Haiti avoided the tragic fate of those on another French island, Guadeloupe, where most of the population was re-enslaved in 1803. The period between these two moments of dramatic transformation was dominated by the legendary leader Toussaint Louverture. Serving the French Republic as the highest-ranking general in the colony, he defended Saint-Domingue from foreign invasion. By the end of the decade, as the central military and political leader in the colony, he began crafting an autonomous domestic and international policy, laying the foundation for the struggle for independence that followed his capture and death in 1802. During these years, he confronted the major dilemmas that would haunt both his successors in independent Haiti and nationalist leaders elsewhere in the Caribbean. In a 1963 afterword to his book, C.L.R. James compared him to Fidel Castro. To preserve emancipation, Louverture decided that he must preserve the plantation.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?